Is there a possibility, I mean, given your experience, that the United States government could get involved in helping resolve the conflict in Cameroon?
I think that is slim to none.
Why so?
Okay, so what's the U.S. interest in doing that? It's like we haven't gone in Ukraine, and we have much more interest in going and setting foot there. So I don't think that the U.S. would ever go in there to help Cameroon. They haven't for 30 plus years, and I don't see that happening. There's not a mass genocide in Cameroon. There are villages being burned and people being killed and a lot of problems. But again, Cameroon is a breadbasket for Africa. So they have a lot of resources, but mostly food resources. Maybe they have rubber. They have some gasoline in the north, petroleum and stuff. But it's not a gold or oil super rich country that it's also a very small country. So I don't think that the U.S. has ever even thought about having any interest in getting involved. And we typically don't. I mean, our Constitution and our case law sort of prevents us getting involved in a lot of government problems that are internal.
You are watching Voices of Africa on the platform Chat Night Africa.
We love Chat Night Africa. Keep watching Chat Night Africa.
Now that you are watching Chat Night Africa and the broadcast Voices of Africa, we will step into the area of asylum seeking in the United States. As I said in my introduction, the United States is the single most sought after destination for asylum seekers on the planet, perhaps because of the economic opportunities, perhaps because of the political freedoms. And because of that, you see people embark on perilous trips, some through South American jungles, attacked by wildcats like lions and tigers, some drown in high stream, fast flowing streams, some are killed by the human traffickers. And then those who make their way to the United States, some get denied asylum. The question I have for you, the first question related to this, Danielle, is does the simple fact that somebody is fleeing from an armed conflict or from a country with armed conflict, you have Burkina Faso, you have Nigeria, you have Ethiopia, you have so many African countries, does that qualify somebody for asylum in the United States?
Not at all. So TPS and asylum are two completely different things. And it's very important to understand that. Because if you see the statute and the way it's written for TPS, you can argue, well, that means that people who are Anglophones as a particular social group for asylum should be granted asylum because of what's happening. So I have won that argument with one judge in California about a month ago. That's not an argument I would present here on the East Coast as a sole argument for asylum because I think it would lose. It's not an argument that should be presented by a good lawyer. I took over this case on appeal. The case had already been done by the judge, so I was kind of stuck with that because the judge had already found that my client, who was not then my client, was not credible because she had not testified credibly. That means the judge didn't believe her. So I was stuck with that one argument. That was the only argument I had that I could use because she'd sort of destroyed her case in every other way, which I'm glad we were able to win.
Why wouldn't, I mean, everybody knows, and I'm sure the judges know, the defending lawyers know what's happening in Anglophone Cameroon. And why wouldn't that constitute a winnable argument?
Because
when
not
people are being
all
killed,
Anglophones are being persecuted just because they're Anglophones, number one.
Would you say
So
that,
it's
please?
basically
Say that again.
Anglophones.
Say that again, please.
Not all Anglophones are persecuted just because they're Anglophones. So some might be persecuted because they also are politically active against the CPDM, but not just solely because they're Anglophone, number one. Number two, there's a case called Matter of R, which says all asylum must be countrywide. That means that you cannot have a situation where you say, okay, I'm not safe living in the Northwest Southwest province. Then the judge says, well, then the government shows it's a rebuttable presumption. Can you live anywhere else in Cameroon? And then the answer becomes yes. And then you also have to show there's two ways that you can win asylum. One is called past persecution. So if you've had no past persecution whatsoever and you're an Anglophone, and this is what happened with a lot of people coming across the border. I was shocked at how little prepared they were for asylum when they came across the border, some of these people. And usually they got attorneys at the border who didn't know really what they were doing, in my opinion, for the most part. So they would come in, they'd say, oh, I'm afraid because if I go back home, they're killing Anglophones. And I'm afraid because they think I'm an Amber boy. I'm a separatist, they think, but I'm not. I'm not really political. I'm not SCNC. I'm not political. I just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, basically is what they were saying. Well, that's a losing argument. If there ever was one, that's not going to win asylum. So, and you're stuck with a lot of things that they've said at the border there in the record. So you're stuck with that record and you have to fix that record. A good lawyer tries to work with the client to figure out what else is there that we can use. Some lawyers just take what's there.
Danielle, let me follow with this question. The United States just commemorated its independence against the UK, Britain. Anglophone Cameroonians, those fighting to separate from the rest of the country, they say that there are cases of there is genocide and they are fighting for independence. Why is fighting for independence by Anglophone Cameroonians not a strong case to win asylum when that's how your people won independence from Britain?
Yeah, the irony of it all, right? So the thing is, okay, so you exactly hit the hammer on the nail there, because if indeed you're fighting, or a lot of Cameroonians will say when they testify or they're talking, they'll say, I'm a militant. I'm an activist militant. Well, militant in the US doesn't mean what militant means necessarily in Cameroon. So militant means you take arms or you fight with violence. So yes, if you're fighting like Amber Boys, anybody who'd be an Amber Boy would automatically be barred from asylum. That's an automatic bar because you use violence. So anytime you use any kind of violence, that is an automatic bar from asylum. So to go back to your question is, why is it okay for the U.S. to do that to get their freedom, but not Cameroon? Well, okay, first of all, U.S. was in a completely different situation. They weren't asking another country to give us freedom. We fought for our freedom, and long before I existed, but that's how it was obtained. So I think every country has armed conflict when it actually gets independence from its tyranny or whoever they consider it shouldn't be. So I think it's a very different situation, because here you're asking the US to give protection to someone for fighting their country. So no, you're not allowed to be a Nazi. You're not allowed to be a communist. You're not allowed to be someone who has taken arms, and you're not allowed to fight, against the U.S. But I wanted to also bring up one issue that you mentioned twice today, and that was about, people are fleeing from cats, fleeing from this, fleeing from that. Okay, so I was just recently in Quebec City, and there by the water, I saw a huge wall of life jackets. At first I thought, okay, who's putting life jackets all over the wall? That makes no sense. Then I found out it was a piece of art, I guess, that some Chinese person had put there, which was a statement on human rights, saying that, think of all the people who have drowned coming over in ships, such as from Haiti. I mean, if you remember, there was a huge influx saying we should bring in the boat people, let them in, give them status. That never happened, right? So yes, it's the fleeing from the country is something that U.S. has always said. That's what the Statue of Liberty represents. Give me your poor, your huddled masses. That's what it says, right? So, but it doesn't really mean you can come in anyway just because you had problems in your country. So you have to, asylum has very specific requirements, very specific statutes, and some things work and some things don't. So if you're not very familiar with asylum, which most people aren't, they come across the board and they tell a story, you might get asylum if you have the right story that meets all those components, but likely most of you aren't going to. So I saw lately the percentage of people from Cameroon who are getting asylum since coming across the border was a lot of denials, like 80%.
80%, that's a huge number.
Yeah.
What were the arguments that led to 80% denial?
Well, most of them didn't have
stunning.
a story. First of all, asylum is based on one of 5 grounds. So you have to either have race, religion, a particular social group, which Anglophones you could argue is, but particular social groups is the hardest one to win. So being a homosexual or lesbian or LGBT, that can be a ground for asylum. All right, especially in Cameroon, because you have that law that persecutes anyone who is LGBT.
Top night Africa, 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 top night Africa.